Great Convos Season 5 is here, and we're coming in strong.
You make me so angry. How come you can never get this correct?
It was okay.
It was not. It started and stopped,
Roger, if you're angry, why don't you just let it out, blow off steam?
Ah!
But Roger, really, does venting really help?
Well, we will soon find out, and we will talk about it. Good afternoon. Happy Monday to all of you who are joining us today. Welcome to Great Convos. I'm Roger Caesar, and that gentleman over there.
Oh, hi, Roger. I'm the messing up guy all the time, apparently. I'm Alexandre Matt. What are our titles today? Did you see what we named ourselves?
I am the vent guy.
I am the guy. Roger, today we ask about blowing off steam, but I know that you want to do something before we go directly to our topic. And what is that?
Well, first of all, let's welcome our loyal listeners who are joining us. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We always appreciate you being here. And as we always say, whether you agree or disagree, you can always find Great Convos. And yes, Alex, you know what? I wanted us to talk about how we vent. How do we blow off steam in our frustrations? Like, go ahead. I mean, come on, you're the guy. Let's know. How do you vent?
Well, sometimes if something bothers you, I mean, the classic example is being behind the wheel. You're in your car, and the person in front of you either stops or doesn't, or goes too fast or not fast enough, and you're just so mad that you need to let it out. And sometimes you will let go some expletives. And when kids are in the car, then they wonder what's going on. So we have to wonder, does that really help? And thinking of the examples of in being in traffic, is that the sort of thing that you would do if you were not in your car? If you were in front of someone, for example, walking on the sidewalk, and someone is too slow or bumping you, would you go off and shout expletives? Well, maybe. I would tend not to, but I think that's something that comes with the car. So are there other situations, Roger, where you just let it out?
I think there's always different situations where you can and possibly will let it out. I mean, if somebody does something that you can clearly see is foolish, you might say to yourself, oh my God, how could they even think of doing something like that? What's wrong with them, right? Or your significant other gets you upset, right?
That never happens.
Upset, and don't try that, Alex. Don't even bother. Don't do it. But the point is that there will be times when you have to vent. Listen, I will say this. There are a lot of times where I have chosen to not vent in the moment, but there are times when I have. You know, I think it's only human nature that there are moments when it just in that moment you have to let it out, blow off some steam, as we said, right?
Right. Now, when we talk about venting or blowing off steam, in this case, I get the example of being in the car, but there are other ways of doing it. And actually, we're going to speak about a particular study that was done a few years ago. So this is, when we say vent it out, blowing off steam, that means like really letting it out. It's not necessarily, oh, I'm expressing my feelings right now. It's being in an aggressive mode, really letting it out. So Roger, you have in your life, have you found that has helped?
I will say it like this, Alex. I think that for me, I would rather get it off my chest right away. Now, does that mean that it has to be aggressive? Not necessarily, but I feel the need. And I'll say this to our listeners, please let us know how you blow off steam? If you are the type that will let it out right away, or do you wait a little while?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be talking about that momentarily. But for me, I've always been the type that wants to get it off my chest right away. I don't like things festering, and that's what it is for me. I just don't like to have things fester. I've seen the results of when somebody lets it sit too long, and then 3-4 weeks down the road, something comes up, and then they bring it up afterwards. And that's when I often will say, why didn't you talk about it at the time when it happened, rather than waiting and letting it fester until something else happened and then you bring it up?
Right. So I guess this goes well with what Kathy has mentioned here. She says, I'm a little disappointed at my contest results. I've been chatting with friends to help with redirecting my feelings, my kind of venting. Now, I'm not sure that this would count as venting. Like if we take Kathy's example of being upset or disappointed about results, venting would be immediately, as soon as you can, maybe go home and think about the people that wronged you and punch a pillow or scream into the street and let everybody know, or at least you, or break things. This is what can feel good, and this is what has been called catharsis theory. You let it out physically and literally, so that you don't let it out on the person who has wronged you. And by doing that, then you can remain calm.
But Alex, what about the other side of it, which is at that moment? Let's go with Kathy. What if in that moment, after the contest just happened, she's upset with her results and she went directly to the chief judge or to one of the other judges that she might have known that was in the room and said, I can't believe that you didn't see that this speech was good enough to win. What if that some people do that? That's their way of getting it off, because they want to feel like, hey, it's right here, it's in the moment, let me deal with it now. If I go home and deal with it, then I don't have the opportunity to hear a result or hear the opinion of that person in that very moment.
Right. Well, first of all, that is a great way of not making friends. If you if you have that approach. And the theory, the catharsis theory is exactly to avoid that sort of situation where you vent it out to something else, an object, for example. There are even places that you can go and rent a room and break glass and hit things with a baseball bat for a certain period of time, just to get it all out before you go out to the real world. So the theory is, by doing that, you let it out on physical things rather than on the people, so that when someone who's upset against that another person then goes back to the person who has wronged them, then they feel better. But here's the thing, Roger. Here's the thing. It feels, what has been studied is that feels good, that venting, even against objects, but thinking about the person that upsets you, it feels good in the moment, but it doesn't help at all. And in fact, further research demonstrated that they only feel really good when they actually vent against that other person. But as I said,
and that's what I was trying to say.
But that's not a good way of. Is that a good way of being social?
Well, listen, it's not necessarily about how. It comes down to how you do it, though, Alex.
Sure.
I'm not going to come and start swearing or, being disrespectful. When you do that, then yes, then you're causing more harm than good. But in the moment, if you are upset, is it not a good practice, would you say, to not go to the person and vent your frustration out in a very respectful way? I think the person would obviously be able to, you'd hope that the person would listen and would understand your frustration in that moment, rather than going home, punching a pillow, or screaming at objects at your house, and then going afterwards and talking when it's already been done.
Right.
I would love, there's different ways of looking at it. And of course, I would love to hear the science behind it so that maybe our listeners can understand where we are going with this as well.
Right. So here's a really fascinating study that was done in 2004 by Brad Bushman. 2002. Does venting anger feed or extinguish the flame? The answer is, spoiler alert, it feeds it. If you vent your anger, it actually makes you more aggressive. This is a really cool study. I'll try to say it in just a few words. They took hundreds of participants and they made them angry by having a fake person be mean to them. Okay, so now the test subject is angry. And then they are in 3 different groups. The first group hits a punching bag while thinking about the other person. So they're feeling really good. They even have videos of them punching and, yeah, I feel really good. And then they have a little a game with the other person without even seeing them. And they test their level of aggressivity and of frustration and anger. And they're actually gleefully being more mean and aggressive towards the other person. The second group did do the punching bag, but they were asked to think about something else. So they were distracted, or they were actually thinking about becoming more fit. So they weren't thinking about the other person. Those people became less aggressive against the person that made them mad. And the third group, what did they do? Absolutely nothing. They just sat there doing nothing. And that was the group that was less aggressive against the other person. So what does it mean? It means that if you're thinking about the person that angered you while you're doing the venting, when you see that person again, you're just going to be more aggressive and more angry. Does venting help? No.
I can't say that that's fully true. And I understand the science behind it, but come on, let's just think about it from that perspective. And you've been upset about certain things as well, and we've talked about it. Do you feel that if you just stayed quiet and remained calm and didn't say anything, that would make you feel much better?
It would certainly.
Be honest with yourself right now. Would that actually make you feel better if you just said, oh, well, they wronged me, or they didn't hear what I had to say, or whatever the case may be, and you just went, oh, well.
Yeah, because I've had the experience of venting, and I know it has not helped me. Roger, there's a reason why my child, who is in kindergarten, at school, when a child is upset, they don't teach them to vent it out, blow off steam, and to scream everywhere. They give them tools such as, it's really cute. My daughter showed me this. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out, as you're counting your fingers. Doing that. That's the sort of thing that can at least calm you down. And then you can be more productive or constructive if you need to express your feelings. And I'm saying I think it's important to express your feelings. It's good to give your opinion. That's what we do every week, you and me. But I think it's counterproductive if you do it in a venting fashion.
Okay, so in some ways, I agree with you, and I think we're saying the same thing, but just in a different way. I'm not saying to go out and be at the person. No, I'm not saying that, because that will be counterproductive. I am actually saying to deal with the situation in that moment, but do it in a very respectful manner. So maybe we need to take the 5 fingers and go, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, before we go out there and actually have the conversation, but to deal with it in the moment. Now, some of our listeners would disagree with that, and that's fine. That's what I appreciate. I think that there's both sides have, they're both right in some ways. If you take some time before you handle the situation, you come with a more level-headed approach to it. But does the other person remember in 2 days from now, 3 days, would they remember all the details if it wasn't dealt with in that moment?
Well, isn't there something that teaches us to wait at least a day before dealing with
Yes.
something that angered you?
Yep.
So maybe
Yep.
that's a good thing. Like
Mhm.
you've certainly experienced it. You wait a day or
Yeah.
two, and then you go to deal with about the issue with that person, and it's like, I don't even remember why I was so upset. Well, maybe it was because of oh yeah, it wasn't so bad. So you
Yeah,
calm
that's
yourself
true.
rather than if you had
Mhm.
been venting for 2 days and just thinking, oh man, when I see this person, I'm gonna give him a piece of my mind.
Hey, I've seen that side of you, Alex. I know you have it in you to do that. Okay.
You see, really? Not in public, eh?
No, no.
I think Kane
Oh,
has an excellent point here. Hi, Kane.
mhm.
What I'm hearing, says Kane, is that it all depends on how you define venting.
It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
Shout
that's a
out to
good
you,
point.
Kane. Thank you very much for being here.
And he adds, I vent to my wife all the time. Now,
Do you win?
I,
Do you win?
now, I'm not sure, Kane, but I imagine that you're venting about other things, not about your wife when you're venting to your wife.
That's it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I think like what is it? Someone Lyubov wrote to us that this is the sort of activity that she does. I go outside to pick up garbage in my neighborhood. This is a distracting
Calm
method.
herself
So
down.
that's right.
To calm
It's calm.
herself down,
And,
right? Yeah, yeah.
and that becomes
There's
quite
also.
therapeutical.
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry about that, Alex. Go ahead.
She says it's quite therapeutical. It helps. So it helps
Mhm.
calm you down. Do something constructive, productive, instead of, I guess the
Right.
alternative would be taking that garbage can and punching it.
Here's another thing that I would suggest, and then I've talked about this before when it comes to even just getting on a stage. Maybe it's also putting on a particular favorite songs that might change your demeanor in that moment. Maybe putting on a playlist that you love listening to maybe relax yourself, give yourself some time in that moment to say, okay, let me see how I can handle this. But the music usually would put you in a better mood if you have your favorite playlist that you have. So that's an idea that maybe if you're in that moment and you want to step back, maybe just put on some music of some sort that you enjoy.
Mhm. So, in other words, Roger, we know we've heard many times letting it out is a healthy thing. You don't want to bottle things up.
Mhm,
I don't think that's, well, I know that's not what I'm recommending. I don't think you
mhm.
recommend keeping things inside, but there's a
Right,
certain way of doing it so that you don't make make enemies or lose friends in the process. And there's also a
right,
way of doing it so that you're not being more aggressive after
correct,
you're finished your coping mechanism.
right. Yeah, that's so true. It's just the idea is at the end of the day, we as human beings are going to be upset. It's going to happen. We're going to have moments where things are not going to go the way we expect it to or anticipate. But it's the idea of venting, and I think Kane said it there the best, that what, venting happens in different ways. If you want to vent the right way, you still can get your point across, but it's about being respectful in that moment rather than having an Alexandre moment where you're and
Look,
exactly.
I've had those moments in the past where I've also vented towards a person, like I'm not proud of it, but a service person. It was over the phone, so less aggressive than if you're in person, but still, I can imagine being on the other end of the phone and receiving these, this aggressivity.
Hmm.
Um, I've I've stopped doing that.
Hmm.
I'm so much happier. So if something
Yeah.
happens, like even a service I'm unhappy about the service I'm getting over the phone,
Hmm.
I'm able to stay calm, take a deep breath, maybe 5 deep breaths, and then ask, um, really be curious to understand rather than just tell them a piece of my mind. And
Right.
usually that is more productive. Usually, almost always, that is more productive than, banging my fist on the table as I might have done in the past
Hmm.
during a conversation.
Right. Well, you see, there's good and bad in all of this, and I'm glad that, first of all, I'm very glad that we've had a lot of our listeners who have chimed in and shared their views when it comes to venting. And here's one that we had put up from Suzanne,
Hmm.
who said venting can be toxic, right? Depending on how you do it, it can be toxic and might come off in the wrong way, and obviously make you look like the worst of it, even though you may have a great point to say in that moment. Yeah, cooler heads do prevail. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
We will put a link to that particular study from Bushman in the notes. But there's that same researcher 20 years later.
Mm,
I mean, he continues researching this topic, and he actually was with another researcher um, to see, well, what does help. Now that we
right.
know that venting doesn't help, what does help? And some of the ideas that we've given here, like deep breath and calm activities, do help. And that's been proven too.
Hmm.
They did a meta study of, I think, 154 different studies with over 10,000 participants,
Right.
demonstrating that distraction and thinking about something else and doing calm things helps the situation at the moment. That's how you can be less aggressive. And that probably helps you to deal with the situation or the problem or the person.
Hmm. I like what Louis Buff said. Hello, Louis Buff. Shout out to you for being here as well. The other side of the coin.
Hmm.
How do you react to someone's venting?
Wow. How do you react, Roger?
Well, I think the first thing is to try to diffuse the situation by at least acknowledging that they're upset. I think
Hmm.
that's the first thing you do, because once you acknowledge, okay, I hear you, I understand that you are upset about this. I think if we handle it in an aggressive way, it just escalates the problem. But at the same time, I can understand why it would if they come in a very disrespectful way towards you. The human nature, our backs get up, we get defensive, and then we want to say something back to them. But if we acknowledge, and I think that's the key, acknowledging that somebody is upset about something, especially if they've done it in a respectful way and coming to you, acknowledge it instead of just saying, no, that's not true. That's not true. Acknowledge it first. That alone can diffuse the issue to a degree. And then the dialogue, how you start to have that conversation. What about you?
Well, a long time ago, I remember going through some training for customer service, and the question was, what happens when a customer is upset and venting like that?
Mm-hmm.
And what I remember from the training is meet their tone, but not their aggressivity, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So they
Right.
so the same volume, but not necessarily the same aggressiveness. And as you said, really understand, let them know that you're listening to them. Because oftentimes that's all someone needs is that they know that they are being listened to and
Yeah.
understood. And once you've got that, then we can go where, as you said, we can have dialogue.
Right. And you may not agree, which again follows what we say here, but at least you've had the conversation in a respectful manner. Right.
Yep.
Well,
Roger,
Alex,
are you still
final
as
thought.
upset? Are you still as upset as you were at the beginning of the episode?
No, I have calmed down now. I
Good.
understand that you make mistakes and it's okay. I
Thank you for
forgive you.
accepting my humanity.
Give your final thoughts, my friend, before we close off.
Well, as Kane said, if it depends on how we define venting. Today we define venting as letting it out while thinking about the person or the thing that bothered you.
Mhm.
And the research that we've demonstrated shows that that's not really the way that is going to help you calm down. It actually might make you more aggressive. What does help? Calming down. It doesn't mean that that you ignore the problem, it means that you have to, as Suzanne said, have a cooler head. And that is how you will be able to prevail and be master of the situation.
Thank you very much, Alex. And thank you to our listeners today who have chimed in and really participated heavily in this conversation. We thank you. We always say to you to continue these conversations when you leave here and find out how other people feel about venting and blowing off steam and how do they do it. And as we always say, whether you agree or disagree, well, you can always find great convos. Take care, everyone. Have a good one.
Have a good week.